nephew, Tom Bradshaw. Morning, Tom.
Morning.
Is there a chance this fury will lead to something more concerted and coordinated in terms of protesting?
Well, I really don't know where this ends up. I mean, we are organising a mass lobby in Westminster on the 19th of November, where we will be inviting members to come and lobby their constituency MP. We will hopefully hear from other members of Parliament who will come and speak to them about the changes that have been taking place and proposed within the budget. Where this ends, I just don't know. The facts that we believe are that the Treasury figures are wrong. They are looking at agricultural property relief only. They're not taking into account where farms claim both agricultural property relief and business property relief. This means they end up massively underestimating the number of farms and family farms that will be caught within the scope of these changes. They're protecting a nice house with a few acres. They're not protecting these family farm businesses that on paper are worth many millions of pounds. But the food production is generating such a low margin that there's no money to pay this inheritance tax.
So how many farms are we talking about here, Tom? Because that's an interesting point, because once it came out, the farmers quite rightly got annoyed, and then there was a sort of counter movement saying, well, hang on a second, they're just moaning here, because actually it's not very many farms at all that will get affected by it. What sort of numbers do you think it involves?
So in any one year, it may be hundreds of farms that are within the scope of the tax when there is a death within the family. But within the scope of within the range that will be impacted, DEFRA's own figures suggest that over two-thirds of farm businesses are worth over £1 million. Around half are worth over £1.5 million. There's also this figure being circulated. People seem to be giving tax advice through the television screen that everybody will be eligible for £3 million. That is a terrible assumption. There are many, many families that will get nowhere near that level of tax threshold before they have to pay inheritance tax. And so it's very, very dangerous having these figures being talked about. The figure that was talked about in the budget was the £1 million exemption. There are nil rate bans that go with this, but don't underestimate. We believe that 75% of the food produced in this country will fall within the scope of this new inheritance tax threshold.
What about people who say, well, it's up to the farmer to bring the next generation on board, make them co-managers, share the farm, and not just simply leave it to them en masse at the end of a lifetime? This can be managed sensibly by farmers if they choose to.
Now, if you know you're going to live for 7 years, you are absolutely right. There's a lot of tax planning that can be put in place to try and mitigate the changes. Unfortunately, until Wednesday morning last week, the very best tax advice for the elderly farmers that are our members that are farming across the United Kingdom was that they should keep the assets until death because they would get agricultural property relief. I am getting heart-wrenching stories sent through to me where there are members of the family that are elderly, that are in ill health and will not have 7 years to pass down that family asset. That is incredibly concerning. The human impact of this has not been registered at all within the planning of how they went ahead with this change.
And what are you going to protest? Could farmers go on strike? Could there be a thing where they say we're not going to provide the food that we provide?
I have never seen the industry with the strength of feeling, with the anger, having been told that agricultural property relief would not be changed by the Secretary of State, having had the now Prime Minister come to our conference and say that he recognises when you lose a family farm, you don't get it back. And then to have the rug pulled out from underneath us in this way is simply not acceptable. We need to enter into this and understand what was the question that this government was trying to answer with the changes that were proposed. I believe that the information that Treasury officials have given to the Treasury, or Treasury ministers, is wrong, and they have based this decision on factually incorrect information.
Well, we'll see what happens, and we'll no doubt speak to you again as the protests and the disputes and the campaign against that continues. Tom, good to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Tom Bradshaw there.